The Paris Agreement on climate change represents a huge opportunity for African countries. In this lecture, we will learn to identify how the climate change goals can enable African countries to be on a track for sustainable development while promoting the economic prosperity for the continent. On one hand, there is a huge opportunity to deploy renewable energy that boosts economic development while reducing greenhouse gas emissions. On the other hand, Africa's vulnerability to the impacts of climate change is very critical, and many African countries are among the most threatened in the world to climate change effects. All 54 African countries have signed the Paris Agreement, and almost 90% have ratified it, the latter in time being Liberia, who ratified in August 2018. In particular, African leaders launched two flagship initiatives on climate change during the COP21, the Africa Adaptation Initiative and the Africa Renewable Energy Initiative, both to increase the effectiveness of adaptation and mitigation actions. During the COP23, the Africa NDC Hub was launched with the aim to support African countries to achieve their Paris Agreement commitments in accordance with their own development priorities and in a coordinated manner. Energy-related greenhouse gas emissions in Africa were around 1 billion tons in 2012, with a share of 3% in global emissions. The African Development Bank estimates that in a business-as-usual scenario, Africa's 2030 baseline total emissions could be around 3.7 billion tons, while they decrease to 2.1 billion tons after the implementation of both unconditional and conditional 2030 targets. In particular, around 25% of this reduction is based on unconditional commitments, while most of reduction is conditional on receipt of international support. This mitigation effort requires important investments, estimated at about $4 trillion by 2030, with financing coming both from international support and internal investments. The goal for African countries is to capture existing opportunities in adaptation and mitigation and to achieve sustainable industrial development with minimal to zero emissions. One example is the building of energy infrastructure that promotes the integration of renewable energy sources to bridge the energy gap, support climate change adaptation, and foster income opportunities. This is particularly relevant for rural areas where people pay up to 20 times more than rich households for unclean and unsafe energy services like lighting sources, mostly based on kerosene lamps, and where charges to grids connection far exceeds monthly incomes. In addition, there is a significant opportunity in phasing out subsidies for fossil fuels, accounting roughly for 1% of African gross domestic product, and then redirecting this sum as investment in low-carbon initiatives that may improve living standards and lead to environmental sustainability. Modernization of key economic sectors in African countries can be also crucial to spur sustainable development and prosperity. Africa is subject to substantial greenhouse gas emissions associated with agriculture, land use change, and forestry. At the same time, agriculture is a key economic sector, employing about 65% of all Africans. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, Africa shared 17% of global greenhouse gas emissions related to agriculture in 2016. Furthermore, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change estimates that the technical mitigation potential of agriculture by 2030 is around 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide per year, which is up to 20% of the global technical mitigation potential in agriculture. Therefore, it is not surprising that agriculture and land use change are among the most frequently included sectors for mitigation in African country INDC and acknowledged at all levels of socioeconomic development. Indeed, sustainable agro-industrialization may create as many as 17 million jobs and boost Africa's agricultural sector to be worth $1 trillion by 2030. In addition, the World Bank states that a 10% increase in crop yields translates to approximately a 7% reduction in poverty. Indeed, agricultural growth is at least 2 to 4 times more effective in reducing poverty than equivalent growth in other sectors. The multiple benefits of meeting the Paris Agreement goals for Africa are manifest, especially looking at the potential of a modern renewable energy infrastructure and at the crucial but still traditional economic sectors such as agriculture and even manufacturing. Thus, investing in new technologies and enabling infrastructures such as those related to the next production revolution is strategic to combine environmental objectives with economic growth. NPR can therefore help Africa in the strategic alignment of climate change goals with national development plans and sustainable development goals.